Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HHWShow Podcast. I'm Obi-Wan, and I'm riding solo here with a special guest. And no worries, man, because this guy, he is a high flyer, very motivated professional wrestler. And I tell you what, man, you're going to enjoy his company as we get set to know who is Landon Hale. But before we even get started, man, I want to take you back into time. Probably year 1993. I don't know. Some of y'all probably wasn't born yet during that time, or let alone know about wrestling. But there are others at my prime. You know, we go back into where Yokozuna, WWF at the time, defeated Hulk Hogan for the WWE Championship, and he lasted for 280 days. And Razor Ramon, who again in a battle royal eliminated Rick Martel to become the Intercontinental Championship. That was controversial because Shawn Michaels said nobody ever defeated him, in which was the famous ladder match that we all enjoy and watch to see. Also in 1993 was the NWA transitioning to WCW, and Ric Flair was the heavyweight champion, defeated Big Van Vader. But there was something very important, and I believe it was in the month of October. And that is the man, Landon Hale, the superstar, the doctor of chiropractics. We're going to learn from him and much, much more. Stay tuned. Landon, welcome to the show.
What's going on? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right, man. Ovi, please call me Ovi.
All right. Sounds good, Ovi. How you doing?
Oh, good, good. Hey, man, once again, welcome to the HHW Show Podcast. Like I say to every guest and stuff like that, hey, bottom line is, who are you? What do you do? And tell me more about yourself.
All righty. So my name's Landon Hale. I am a chiropractor. Yes, I'm a doctor of chiropractic, hence the good doctor. I'm from Kentucky. I'm now living in Massachusetts. I've been here now for a year, so I'm just getting acquainted to the Northeast. And yeah, I've been pro wrestling now for almost, I guess August would make 5 years that I've been a pro wrestler. So I'm living both my real dream, or my kid, I should say, like fantasy kid dream, and my real dream. So I couldn't be any more blessed.
Well, it's a blessing to see your type of action in the ring. I got to see you, I think the two previous ones that we'll talk about later. I think it was Tag Wars. You went against Brad Baylor, and then they put you on a six-man tag back in, I think, Spring Slam, if I'm not mistaken.
It was
And
Spring Slam.
right. And you stood out. You stood out in front of Eric Chacha and Jake Lynn. And you got the fans up on their feet every time you did the maneuvers against, I think, the Victorium. And then, of course, they wanted to cheat their way through for a victory. But I'm sure later on down the road, there's payback in line. I'm sure.
Oh, 1,000%. Just that, like, as your chiropractor, they need to watch their backs. Am I right?
Absolutely, you could have said it best right there. Um, but you were talking about, since you were little, that's your dream. So what made you pursue it over and over? Like, going through teenage life, your adulthood, and everything, you still wanted to become a wrestler. Why was that?
It was such a tough time in my life, and I'd say growing up because and a lot of people know about this as well, but my dad passed away when I was 7. And before he passed away, the one thing that we had a common grounder that we bonded over a lot was pro wrestling. And again, we had a bunch of other common things that we would do, obviously like a father and son would, but the one thing that we would be so attached to and so close to was pro wrestling. He was a big Kevin Nash fan. I was a big Rey Mysterio Jr. fan, and I was watching more of the WCW during that time anyways. So he passed away when I was 7. And I guess throughout the lifetime, I guess from the time I was 7 when he passed away up until probably fourth grade, and through these stories, you'll understand that I'm really good with like history and details of like specific things. But I remember going to a basketball tournament, and I remember seeing Saturday Night Velocity, and that was a thing back then. No one, like, the younger kids don't know what Saturday Night Velocity or Sunday Night Heat is. And so when we had Saturday Night Velocity, remember watching Rey Mysterio wrestle in a Fatal 4-Way, and I was like, oh man, this is my guy. This is someone I looked up to when I was watching wrestling. And then so that got me back into it. Now, again, I'm from an area of Kentucky where it's not so heavy on, the independent scene. So like, I'm up here, Massachusetts, you have Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. It's literally a hotbed in the Northeast. In Kentucky, it's not so much. You either have to go more central, you have to be more in Tennessee or Georgia, those areas. So fast forward to, high school, college, all that stuff. I didn't really have, like, I wanted to play basketball, and that wasn't in the works for me. I'm a firm believer that God works in mysterious ways for you and through you. It's to be like, hey, maybe this isn't the route that I want you to take. You have other things and better things that are there for you. So it's just be patient and be kind. So in that sense, I wanted to play basketball. It didn't work out for me. I've tried out for so many different teams. I've tried out for so many different leagues, different scouting situations, never worked out. Then I went to Morehead State University, and that's where I wanted to be a physical therapist. And from there, I switched to chiropractic, and I remember being injured in a basketball game or during weight training or whatever it may be. It was, the details were there. But I remember going there to a chiropractor, and I was like, oh man, this is life-changing. And at that time, I was like, okay, how do I look into chiropractic care? And then again, this isn't us against anything like physical therapists, because I love what physical therapists do. Just wasn't my area of like what I wanted to do. So looked in, did a bunch of studying, and then, before you know it, after I graduated, I moved down to Georgia. But now before I moved down to Georgia, tied things back in with wrestling, one of my buddies does pro wrestling out in Eastern Kentucky, and he does like these very, very small shows, maybe like 20 to 30 people show up, and it's no big deal. But he was telling me about it, and I remember he made a post one day, and it was like, compare two wrestlers, and I just asked him, two wrestlers, then just in the rabbit hole of asking a lot of questions. Then I just shot him a message, and I said, hey, how do you get into pro wrestling? So he took me one day, and this was July 1st of 2018. He was like, come over to my buddy's house. We have a ring set up in the backyard, and then we'll be able to take some back bumps. And I was like, all right, sounds cool. So I went to my buddy's house, which, rest in peace to him, because he passed away a couple of years ago. But we went to his house, and my buddy was there, and he was like, hey, like, let's do some bumps. Let's see what's going on. Yada, yada, yada. It literally felt like home. I was sore the next day, but it felt like home. I was just like, this feels like something I can do for the rest of my life if I wanted to, or at least until the wheels fall off. And the guy that trained me, or the guy that took me, he was like, you need to get proper training to make sure everything's good before you actually have your first match. So I went to a guy by the name of Mike Sampson, which he goes by the independents as Iron Cross. He wrestled
Okay.
under the name Mike Scarberry, which he was doing a lot of like jobber stuff back in the day in the WWF. So he got to job out to like the Steiner brothers. He got to job out to the Hearts. So there's a lot of teams that he was jobbing out to, but he knew his bread and butter when it comes to like the basics. And so I was like, all right. So he got me under his wing on that. I only had 2 training sessions. And then the show that was in East Kentucky during that time, they were having a tournament to see who's going to be the next champion. And I wanted to be a champion, or I wanted to, again, these kids like, oh, like I dream of being a champion. I dream of being a pro wrestler. And I showed up there, and in Kentucky, you have to have a license to wrestle, to referee, to do whatever. So if you have your Kentucky license, you can do whatever you want to. One of the promoters, or the promoter, his wife came up to me and was like, hey, do you have your license? And I said, yes. She was like, okay, you're going to be a referee. Obviously kind of bummed, but, again, you have to start somewhere. I've started a bunch of places somewhere, some way, somehow. I mean, I've seen you before even getting into the wrestling ring. But when I was there, I'm very thankful for 2 guys, and their name is Eric Porter and and as soon as I say the first name, then I can't think of the name.
It's all good.
JT Walker and Eric Porter, and they come up to me like, "Hey, like, let's get in the ring. Let's see what you can do." So I did everything in the ring, very basic stuff, and they're like, "Wow, this guy needs to be in the tournament." So I only had 2 days of training, and I had
Wow.
my first, and I had my first ever match. So that's how quickly it came to me.
Okay.
Um, and then I had like maybe 2 or 3 matches there, and then you fast forward to when I went down to chiropractic school in Georgia. I looked into different promotions, I looked into different trainers, and the one that stuck out to me the most that I was going to get, you know, more knowledge than anywhere else is under Robert Gibson, and that's my
Hmm.
wrestling dad. That's who I was trained under for from October of 2018 up until May of 2021.
And
And
he is the one half of the Rock and Roll Express.
yes, sir.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, that as a childhood, I used to watch Rock and Roll Express and AWA. So like that's like some old school wrestling there that it's phenomenal. And I always wish that they had when I think was during that time, the Rockers, all these rock and roll just instead of like the Legion of Doom, they were all husky. Those are the guys that I always wanted to I fantasized of being a wrestler myself, but I knew that I wasn't cut out for that anyway. But yeah, those guys, man, I always followed them through. So Gibson himself, wow, man, congrats to you.
Yeah, he's such a good dude. And I know that he's not so much like talkative on the mic as, his partner, but
Right.
when you get him, yeah, but when you get him behind the scenes and you ask him a lot of questions, and he's one of the most humblest dudes in the world. He's so nice. He'll go out of your way to do anything. And his school shut down in May of 21, and it wasn't for any reason. It's just the building got bought out, so we couldn't find anywhere else. And then so I started learning under the AR Fox's tree at WWA 4. And so I was able to pick at his brain a little bit. And now I'm at New England Pro Wrestling Academy, which is in North Andover. And I'm training under Chase Del Monte and Scott Guerin. So,
Okay. So it benefits you because like you mentioned before, you're now living in Massachusetts and you're surrounded with New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, even up in Maine that they have wrestling promotions there. So you don't really have to travel far to get to places.
I do not. It's definitely better than Georgia in some places, because in Georgia, I think the most I've ever driven to a show in, I guess, in Georgia, when I was booked. Because again, I was, I guess, 2 or 3 years in at the time, so I wasn't out as much as I should, and obviously I was still in school, so it's kind of hard to like go to bigger places when needed. But
Right.
the furthest I've ever driven was probably 5 hours one way to a beach show in South Carolina, which we got to wrestle on the beach. And that's pretty cool.
Right.
Um, but it's so funny though, because it's literally just one state over versus here. It's like, hey, you got to travel through Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and then you're there in 3 hours. I'm like, okay, that's nothing. So
Right.
it makes
Well, I
trips
believe
a
you.
lot easier.
But during your time, you suffered an injury.
Yeah. So in September, it was like late September of last year, I ended up having so I was doing a bunch of like, I was getting like, I was on a different program, I was on a different eating regimen, and I felt like I was in one of the best shapes that I was in. I was in a
Mhm.
stocky, type of build, but I was like, at a lean 205 pounds. So it was kind of like a jacked look. And I was like, oh, I can feel great. I'm feeling powerful. And so one day during my workouts, I was trying to do some heavy hang cleans, and I was trying to do, I think it was like 255 on the bar, and I got it the first time, but then the second time when I was going for it, my hand slipped, and so I kind of like brought this
Oh,
back, had a little bit of a, jerk to it. So my wrists were sore for the next couple of days, which I need my wrist and hands for adjusting for my chiropractic job. So it's kind of like, okay, I'll cool it on the jets a little bit. So later on that week, I was having a 4-day wrestle week. It was like a Thursday chaotic, Friday Atlantic Pro Wrestling, Saturday Fight Life, and then finishing off that Sunday at Invictus. Well, Fight Life came along, and I was in a triple threat against Ricky Smokes and TJ Crawford. And then as soon as I realized where that was after watching back, I was kind of like, oh, it may have been this spot. But when I was, I guess there's a spot where I went up to the top rope and I hit a frog splash. And then as you see the frog splash in slow motion, because it catches it at this view as we're looking at each other, it shows that rather than landing on my forearms, I landed on an outstretched hand. And then that's how I ended up fracturing. It's what's called a scaphoid bone. And it sets in
Ooh.
this pocket. It sets in this pocket right here. It's kind of like you make a triangle pocket. And so it sets
Yeah,
in
I'll
here.
zoom in real quick to see. Go ahead. Oh, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Producer. All right.
Yeah. So it sits right in here. So in this case, for me, so this is the one that injured is right in here. So in September of last year, I had the injury, and this is a very crucial bone that needs to heal because it depends on the type of fracture. If it's fractured, somewhere in the middle or lower, there's not enough blood flow that gets to it. So if you don't get surgery on it, then you're going to have a good chance of osteoarthritis at a very early age, and I don't want that. If it's towards the upper portion, there's still a good chance. So when they checked the fracture, they saw that there wasn't enough blood flow, that the fracture wasn't as good as it was. So then I was like, you know what? If there's still a good chance of it healing, I want to let it heal for 6 to 8 weeks, and that's usually the typical idea for a bone to heal. So you
Mm.
fast forward from late September, early October to about early November. They did the X-rays, and you can see that when you look at an X-ray film, and this is like a little educational thing for anyone that wants to watch this, if you see a fracture and you see that it's two pieces of bone, so or like whatever it may be, if you notice that one side of the bone is wider than the other side, that means there's not enough blood flow that's getting to it, meaning that it's getting calcified, meaning that no blood flow is getting to it, so it's becoming dead bone. So when they did the updated X-rays, they saw that it was becoming dead bone, that I needed to get the surgery as soon as I could.
Wow.
So rather than getting the surgery as soon as I did, I was like, okay, I have faith in God that it's going to be healed up. And unfortunately, it took a different route. So I ended up having the surgery November 29th, and I ended up having to have a plate and screw, or not a plate screw. I had a screw put in. They also took a piece of bone out of my wrist, which that's the reason why I have this scar right here.
All right. I
So
see
they
that
took a piece of,
scar. Okay.
mhm. So they took a piece of bone from here, and then they added a screw that goes right in here, so that way it inserts in. And so I had to let that heal for so long. And then once I was in a cast, I think it was like a soft cast for 2 weeks, and then after that, that's when I was able to, be in a hard cast for 6 to 8 weeks, and then they want to see how well everything holds up. So if you want to do a zoom in, I don't know if you can see that or not. So that's what's in my wrist right now.
Wow. Okay. And that doesn't affect you as right now. Does that affect you on the way you rotate your wrist and stuff or no?
It's it's stiff. It's
It's stiff.
yeah. So it's kind of like if you look at it,
Hmm.
you can definitely tell that there's a little bit of a like a bending thing on this end,
Right. I
and
got
then
you.
and it kind of takes a little bit too for my wrist to warm up. But even this, like, there's still some work that needs to be done.
Okay.
Yeah,
So how
but
does that reflect you now that because I've followed you on Twitter, you always make comments about, oh, I can't wait till I get back in the ring. Soon, there's soon. And then finally, I actually seen you even before you performed for Northeast Wrestling. You was on the side looking in. And I was like, man, I know that guy from somewhere. I couldn't figure it out. So I got home. I was like, oh, that's Landon. I think he's gonna wrestle in Northeast Wrestling. And yeah, the following month, here you are, you're wrestling. And now that you went through all those phases, the surgery and everything else, did that change anything in your performance?
it does a little bit. I mean, I still have to be careful with a few of the move sets that I have in my arsenal. Obviously, I have to be very cautious with the moves that I take, the bumps I take, and again, it's one of those I have to be cautious with myself because again, I can do the drop downs, I can do, like everything, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a little bit sore. And
Right.
this is kind of like, and so whenever I went through the whole CT scans, X-rays after my surgery and making sure that it builds up to this moment, I was working well with my occupational therapist that works on specialty with hands and wrists, and she was saying that if you can give a timetable on full range of motion, if someone's been in a cast for that long, you double it. So in my
Mm.
case, where I was in a cast for 4.5, 5 months, it should take me between 9 to 10 months to get my full range of motion back. And so from February being out of the cast up until May, it's been 3 months. I would even give myself some grace and say that this is really good success.
Before we even get started with that wrestling style, let me bring in the CEO of Clovercrest Media, Joe Aguirre. Joe, thank you for joining in. I know it was a short notice that I got you involved, but I'm glad you're here. And you heard a little bit of what was going on. You want to add some input into it?
Yeah, well, Ovi hit me up and was like, "Hey, I need you for this interview," and he really doesn't. He's fantastic. He really is, and he follows this local scene like nobody else that I know. That said, he was like, "I want you to jump on here. This guy's like up and coming," and I've just been sitting backstage for the last few minutes. You seem like you clearly understand the business of wrestling, right? And that even in losing, there's the opportunity to win the crowd, right? And thus to win the night. And what is this charisma that you have? Have you been a performer in your life? Were you in school plays or anything? Because you just seem like just in a few minutes I've been watching a very dynamic personality, which again, I mean, I think skills are important. You've got that, but it's that part of the personality that really makes the wrestler.
Oh, I appreciate that, and it's one of those things too where, again, growing up, I've always been involved in sports, but also too, I was kind of like, I wouldn't say the center of attention, but people try to make you the center of attention. Like, like you out with your buddies, you're like, hey, do that one thing that you like, and then you're like, oh, and you give yourself a wedgie and it hurts. Like, that's just an example.
Yeah.
but no, it's one of those things where like, hey, Landon, you can do this dance well. Can you dance? Or hey, you play piano. Can you play piano? Can you sing us this song? That'd be so cool. Like, it's always like, I don't mind being the center of attention, but it's just those moments where it's like, I have played piano growing up. I have been singing a long time in my life. So there's just a lot of those things that it naturally comes to me where I'm just like, it's just a natural thing. I don't know.
What's your upbringing? Siblings? What do you got?
I have an older sister and an older half sister. So one of them
Okay.
is 32, the other one's 40.
Okay.
I'm the
And
baby of the
because
family.
well, so right, that's the thing. I understand exactly what you're saying because my brother and sister were shy and not good at anything, and I was, and so like my mom would always kind of push me front and center no
Come
matter
on,
what. No,
Joe. We don't want to start a domestic over there as soon as you get off the mic.
I don't.
You're like, I'm amazing. I don't know what's going on.
But I'm saying I think as the young and because I was the youngest also for like 10 years, and then I had my mom had younger brother. But before that, it was always me, and so again, I think you can just some people get it right, like I cover a lot of combat sports, like Nate Diaz is a guy who is there to fight people. He's not there he doesn't understand the entertainment element and the fact that you kind of have to play along, right? Obviously, that's a different sport, but again, it's like that guy's amazingly talented. But the guys that are like main cards are guys that are going to put on a performance, guys that are going to talk smack and be intelligent about it. And it's so important. I'm just curious as you've been sort of going through the independent circuit, like how have you learned that? Like, what have you seen going around and performing?
There's just a lot, and again, I take everything as much as possible because again, like there's people out there they think, oh, if I watch this a little bit, it's gonna hit me all at once. But you have to like learn under someone specifically, or learn under a lot of people, and that's the reason why I like going to do some of these seminars. And like I mentioned with OVU before, my main trainer was Robert Gibson. and he's literally psychology to a T. And so that's why I'm like listening to like, hey, like, you have those moments where you don't want to just jump out the curtain. And I've had those moments again where you're nervous your first time and you're like, yeah, cheer for me. I will pay you to cheer for me. Like, you don't want to have that forced motions. And I'm glad that like I'm sort of like naturally getting into it, because I think once you step out of that comfort zone of like the confidence level kicks in. And I've always had those moments of like I know I'm good, but I don't. But like in those moments, I'm like, am I really that good? And so I try to personify what young Landon would look up to if he was to look at me right now. So way someone that's like, oh, like he's inspiring, like it's someone that he can be able to, emulate after, like maybe later on in life. And so that's
I'm
kind of
glad
like
you
something
mentioned
I
that.
try to take that. Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Landon, because that's very important, especially for my young viewers that are watching. Is like you always want to study your profession. Just because you made it there doesn't mean that everything's golden. You still got to have professional development. You say you went to seminars. Mike, I'm messing up my words here. Seminars and
Yeah.
stuff, and I've heard that from others too. But there's a lot that they go and say, "Hey, I made it. I'm just gonna do enough just to stay where I'm at." And I'm glad that you're focused, because listen, I mean, what is your ultimate goal here in professional wrestling?
My ultimate goal, really, it's right now. It's nothing set in concrete, and I will say this because again, there's always a good thing when it comes to being able to live out my reality job and also my fantasy job, but also at the same
Mhm.
time you have to make sure those two don't collide. So I work in an office that's open from Monday through Thursday. I don't work Fridays, which is nice. That gives me a chance to wrestle. However, if and this is just a hypothetical, Tony Khan busts down my door and just contract in my face, I would have to say, like, I'd have to think about it or I may have to pass. And the reason being is that I made a contractual obligation to my main boss that I work under. And so it's going to be kind of hard for me to be like, hey, I'm going to take off every Wednesday, or hey, I'm going to take off every so often just to, wrestle, when I can do that later on when I have a better schedule, and once me and my wife open up our own office, which she's a chiropractor as well. So long-term goal for wrestling is hopefully, if things work out with the chiropractic favor or with the chiropractic deal, if we were to work in the same office and open up our own place, have flexible hours, maybe then there's a lot of what ifs, anything can change. Everyone at one point, they're like, oh, I love WWE. And now Vince is back in the picture. It's like, oh, I hate WWE. I love AEW. Back and forth. It's always going to be those games of, do you want to be signed here? Do you want to go there? If I just get an opportunity, I'm just very thankful at the end of the day. And again, that's, it's a business. So I have to like sit down and look at everything. But if I get signed to MLW tomorrow, that's again, I'll have to look at the papers and see what that's like. Impact, I've done extra stuff with them. I know them really well. If it's a chance where they're like, hey, we'll give you this opportunity, that's something I'll have to sit down and look at as well. So it really just depends. But any offer I get, I'd be very humbled and very blessed to have that.
Short term and was it short term and long term goals you mentioned? And again, I mean, we're going back to education, right? That you got to have a plan, and you have to plan A, B, and sometimes none of those plans even work. But you got a good head on your shoulders. Graduate as a chiropractor, you're working. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So you're putting food on the table, and that's very important.
Yeah, and it was really tough too during the time when I had my wrist injury, because I was in a cast for so long. And so obviously being in a cast, I couldn't adjust. So my boss is very fortunate, and like my boss is amazing. If you know the guy, he's one of the best dudes that you'll ever meet. And when I told him about it, he's like, "Well, get the surgery, get back on your feet." And because he's been through something like that before. And usually in those situations, they tell you to kind of back off of your dream, but at the same time, if you were to go hiking and you sprained your ankle, that's not going to stop you from hiking again. Or if you hurt your shoulder playing basketball, that's not going to stop you from playing basketball again. So why am I going to stop my dream because of this one injury? And again, I have to be very cautious moving forward now, or more cautious, I should say, moving forward. But it's never going to stop me with living my dream and seeing the goals that I would like to achieve. And again, the whole signing under someone, you don't have to be successful to sign under somebody, but it would be nice just to say that you worked under television, or like under a television wrestling company for for however long it may be. So who knows? Sky's the limit.
Ovi, Ovi, let me ask you this question. When you asked Landon what his ultimate goal is, did you want him to be like WWE championship? Were you looking for that a little bit though?
I think
You were
you
kind of
know
hoping that, but he gave you like the
he,
long-term business strategy.
right, and again, that is the right answer. I mean, you always say dream big, right? Dream big, but sometimes dream doesn't come true, and I'm not surprised at that. And again, maybe because now that I've interview other superstars and stuff like that. And yes, Landon, you are a superstar. All right.
I
So
appreciate it. Thank you.
don't put yourself down. You don't got to be on television to say you're a superstar. What you do and you sacrifice your body and everything else just to entertain the crowd. That's a superstar.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You mentioned your wife,
Yeah.
and I don't. You mentioned obviously some siblings, so you have a family. Clearly, you're not an orphan. But how important is it when you're attempting to work your dream goal? Because I've only worked in media for the last 25 years.
Right.
And it took the support of a lot of people. My first wife didn't make it. She's still alive. But she did. Yeah, it's hilarious.
I was literally holding on to my. I was like,
yeah, no, don't worry
That's
about.
That's all I need.
But again,
no, go ahead.
It's funny. I don't know if Ovi told you I was his broadcast instructor, and one of the things I tell the students, and I tell them this all the time, and I think you can attest to this as a guy again pursuing your dream job here. How important is it to have support around you? People that are not like, Landon, just give it up, just go be a chiropractor, stop messing around, you're going to get hurt. Having people in your life that are encouraging you and supporting you, and I had a boss when I first got into the business that was like, if the radio station needs you, just go. You don't have to even tell us you're leaving. That was so instrumental in me having that flexibility to get into this thing full time and never look back.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have that. And again, that cliche thing of, you want to have that support of your family and of your friends. And I will say, starting off, when I was, and again, talking with Ovi earlier about whenever I came into the wrestling business in 2018 in Eastern Kentucky, there's nothing there. They want to go four-wheeling. They want to go play basketball. They want to go to their family reunions where they met their first wives and first husbands. But it's one of those, and I hope you got the joke too.
Yeah, I know I got it. I was waiting for the other one. And cousins, right?
No, it's blood. If it's,
I got you.
I'll have to tell you a joke after. It's not appropriate for this, but anyways. Anyways, 2018. And again, if you were to look at the Kentucky or the talent, there's good talent that's from Kentucky, but if you look at the promotions that run there, some of the promotions, you're just kind of like, oh, Landon, you're wrestling there. It's like, maybe you should just like, I don't know about that. And that's how my mom was at first, because again, being the baby of the family, it's kind of like, you don't want to get hurt. You don't want to do anything like this. And then after my first match and my mom saw me there, she was like, oh, wow, like you're really good. And then whenever I moved down to Georgia, again, it's a different atmosphere versus East Kentucky. And moving up to Massachusetts, and, my wife, she's one of the, if not the biggest supporter of my wrestling dream. And she's always told me, like, Landon, you're going to make it big one day. It's like, you have these dreams, and, it's like, I love the ambition that you have, because even, and this goes back again to the mindset going back into wrestling. It's 2021 was a year of opportunity. I've had a lot of opportunities to help build myself up. 2022 was a year of respect, gaining respect from other wrestlers. And now 2023 is a year of resilience, meaning that I'm not going to let anything stop me from getting back into something that I love to do. And I feel like there's a lot of good opportunities that's busting down my doors that I'm able to, take those opportunities and run with it. So being able to, again, wrestle for Northeast Wrestling, they're a great promotion, doing stuff with like Open and, possibly Beyond stuff. And now I just got announced to do Scenic City Invitational, which is the biggest tournament in the Southeast, if one of the biggest tournaments in the country. And so, and there's a lot of people that came out of that tournament that has progressed and has moved on to bigger things, like Billy Starks. She's in AEW. Robert Martyr, he's wrestled so many of his heroes, including Minoru Suzuki. You have Matt Riddle that came out of there, Leo Rush. I can literally name so many people. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the support of people behind you, especially the ones that love you the most, which is your family, your friends, whoever it may be, it's very important to see them fuel your jetpack a little bit, to say, hey, keep on going, you're doing the right thing. And so that's what motivates me. But I'm very thankful for my wife that she sees how all this is, and she's been through everything, especially with my wrist injury. So I'm very thankful for her.
Don't mess around.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Don't mess around. You got this. You got to go ahead and just show that. I said that earlier. You do. Let's get away from wrestling a little bit.
Let's do it.
You a sports fanatic.
A little bit.
You was happened to be at the Garden, were you?
I was not, unfortunately.
No. But you're a Celtics fan?
Well, I will say, again, being from Kentucky, when it comes to pro sports team, I can't really be – I could be a fan of any team that I want to, because it's like, oh, you're from Boston, you have to be a Celtics fan. Oh, you're from Minnesota, you have to be a Twins fans. Like, there's a lot of fans, you're just born into it. So in East Kentucky, I'm not born into anything. So I was able to – it's like if you want to be like the local team, where it's like, okay, like the Cincinnati Reds or the Cincinnati Bengals or the Memphis Grizzlies, like those are like the teams. So when I moved up to the Northeast, I was like, I will be any Boston team. I will be any Boston fan except for football. And I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, even though Rodgers went to the Jets. So I'm just kind of like,
don't worry about that. Jordan Love got that situated over there. Don't worry about that.
Well, Landon, that's a good person to bring up here. You know, Aaron Rodgers is such a great talent, and yet oddly he's this like anti-hero. He doesn't seem to embrace the stardom of sports. He seems to shy away from that and almost reject it. Why do you think that is? Do you see people approaching wrestling like that at all?
Not really. Well, I mean, and I will say in my defense too, I don't think that I'm at that stardom level where people are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, it's the good doctor here, like sign my whatever." I'm like I've never had that. Like I'll have a few fans here and there. Like I remember running into one of the fans from a local promotion again in Massachusetts. It's called Atlantic Pro Wrestling, and he's seen me on a few of the circuits. And we were there for the NXT show. I happened to show up there for the NXT Battleground pay-per-view. And he was just like, "Oh, hey, Landon, how are you doing?" And, I met a couple other friends there. And I just remember, like, it was a cool thing here. Like, "Hey, you know who that is? That's the good doctor." Like, it's a cool moment where he's like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." But I haven't had anyone, like, rush me, like Taylor Swift just be like, "Oh, it's Landon." Like, I don't know. It's nice. It's nice to have, like, that spotlight moment of, like, hey, like, it's cool to be presentable, but you don't want everyone and their grandmothers to like, like if the president's coming in, just everyone's swarming in on you. Like, I don't like that attention. Like, it's cool to have attention, but not too much, if that makes sense.
No, I totally understand. The time will come when you use the back door and then you sneak your way to the front row and sneak your way back. It's cool. Bust out the red carpet for you.
Yeah, it's cool. And like I tell people all the time, because and again, with wrestling, I use my work and shoot name together. So like I try to be as real and transparent with everybody as possible. So it's like I tell everyone on podcasts or everyone in general that I have a Facebook page and I have a real life, like my actual personal page. I don't want you adding me as a person on a personal page if you're just a fan. If you're a fan of me, please like my page. Don't try to add me as a friend and then message me every 2 seconds saying, "Hey, when are you wrestling again?" Or, "Hey, when are you doing this?" It's like I still promote that. You can still like the page, or you can still follow me on these socials, and I'm still able to give that out. So it does get like tiresome, but I can see where Aaron Rodgers is coming from, where it's kind of like he just wants to just do his thing, play football, and just relax. But I get it where it's like a big media thing where he's been with the Packers for so long now. It's like getting every single answer out of him when it's just like, I'm just here to it's business.
Do you buy the idea that if he wins a Super Bowl with the Jets, that he is in the running for GOAT status? I saw some idiot on ESPN throw that out there.
I think he's already the GOAT. I mean, you have a lot of people.
Well,
I mean, you have
because you're a Green Bay Packer fan, right?
Who's number 2 on the list? Brett
so
Favre?
Hold on. Nah, come on. Brett Favre's
And number
got to
3,
be better than Aaron Rodgers.
Just going down the list.
That's the top 3. Don Majkowski 4.
Are you serious though? You're gonna like 5. Put Brett Favre over Aaron Rodgers? Seriously?
No, but I mean, like I do think he is of GOAT status because I mean, if you look at different, like not let's go away from football for a second. Let's look at basketball. My favorite basketball player ever is Chris Paul, but he's never won a ring. Charles Barkley, he's never won a ring. Steve Nash never won a ring. But what do those guys have in common? They are awesome. They have held the ground down in the NBA for so long, and they've broken milestones. They've accomplished a lot. So it's like you don't have to have a ring to signify how awesome you are. There we go. I don't know. So I don't know.
By the way, let me clear this up for every idiot out there when they have this debate about the greatest NBA player of all time. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I don't understand. Do you guys? I don't know if you know this. Do you know how he had the sky hook? Do you know why he invented the sky hook?
Because people couldn't jump.
They banned dunking because he was so good that they eliminated the dunk from basketball.
About that.
Yeah. That's like when you talk about the greatest pitcher in Major League history, if you don't mention Bob Gibson's the reason they lowered the pitcher's mound. Like when, you look at a guy like a Steph Curry, when you like change a game fundamentally, or the rules have to be changed because you're so good at it, you're the GOAT.
Yeah. Like breaking the 3-point line back so many feet just for him.
Yeah.
That's
when
in one sense, I mean, that's your angle. My angle is that it was a different era. And I hate when people compare like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, or, well, you're not including Magic Johnson. You're not including, like you said, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I still feel like during that time, they paved the way for the others to come to the industry, right? So you got to perform at a certain way, but how can you be better? So every decade or so, the game changes because they're being more athletic. And the same thing with wrestling. We don't see in wrestling all the big guys like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? We don't see all that. We see a combination of diversity inside the ring. And I was explaining to Landon earlier, man, this guy is a high flyer. This guy, and you mentioned it too, Joe, you brought it up about the charisma and everything else. It's like once he's in the ring, the people already got his attention. But he is not 7 feet tall. He is not, beast mode or anything like that, like a Brock Lesnar type. He is the natural, the good doctor, Landon Hale, doing his thing, and he's starting that fan base. So people are like him and stuff like that. And like you said, his role model is Rey Mysterio Jr. The dude is short. He's flying everywhere, everything else. So again, you don't have to be that guy. Anyone, okay, I can't say anyone, but like a person like him, he's a superstar. So again, it's a different era, and he represents who he is. And we're living in the world today that we have a taste of anyone could be our favorite fan.
Yeah, but how much of that is, right? Like if you're Rey Mysterio, you have to be insanely talented to make up for the deficit of your height, or the fact that you're not like a dynamic personality. You're not really emptying the toolbox. So that's how good you have to be flying around the ring to survive as a one-tool guy.
That's a good point. It's kind of like you look at El Hijo del Vikingo, like he's coming to Northeast Wrestling. Like he's 5'5", but he does everything that you would do if you had to create a player and wanted to do everything under God's green earth, he can do it.
Love that. That's the perfect
Yes,
way to.
I
That's
like
how
that.
everybody understands
Yes.
what you just said.
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
perfect. Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. There's, I think one of the things, like, for me growing up, as a huge wrestling fan growing up, I think every kid goes through that time where you have to. And my favorite wrestler as a kid was Tito Santana. And you can imagine my shock. Ovi and I interviewed him 2 years ago.
Just about, yeah.
You know how shocked I was to find out he was not from Mexico and that the place in Mexico he claimed to be from doesn't exist. That he's actually from Texas and his name is, what is his name?
His name is Miguel, by the way.
Yeah,
And he
come
lives
on.
in New Jersey.
It's all a lie. Or you find out like who was Chief J Strongbow was an Italian. He was just, you know what I mean? It's like you have to have a look. You have to embrace your look, whatever it is. You have to develop a character. And while you're building all that out and trying to develop some relationship with a fan base, you also have to be really good at wrestling, right? Like if you can perfect all of these different parts, because I mean, from what I understand, and maybe I don't know anything, but part of wrestling is being a good partner in the ring. When you're fighting somebody, if you're, graceful and you're not hurting them, and you know what I mean? It makes for a lot more. Like I read a lot about like the Ultimate Warrior sucked at wrestling. And while the character was awesome, nobody wanted to be in the ring with him because he used to hit people in the face, like it's too sloppy. And that hurt him in the long run.
It takes two to tango if you want to use that. So you have to have a good dance partner. So it's kind of like it's like Dancing with the Stars. You want to have a good dance partner to have this best performance. And if one person doesn't perform the way that they should, then the whole act gets ruined. If that's a good analogy.
Speaking about partners, who is one or maybe more than one? Can you name that so far if you're going against that opponent, that's the guy that's you guys are going to dance away. Who is that?
So funny enough, and this goes back to the Scenic City Invitational. So, and for the viewers that listens to this, so the Scenic City Invitational, it's 16 competitors all over the country and some all over the world that come down to this tournament, and it's presented on IWTV. It's the biggest tournament in the Southeast, one of the biggest tournaments in the country. Timothy Thatcher's in it. Shaza McKenzie, she's like the first ever Australian to be in it. So there's a lot of different competitors, but the one person that I would tango with for the rest of my life is probably Eli Knight, and that's who I'm facing in the first round. So we have a good history of each other where we met each other at Action Future Showcase in 2021, and this was in August of 2021. And the Future Showcase is one of the smaller events that happens within the Scenic City Invitational weekend. So, and it's a smaller show. Not a lot of people show up to it, but this presents who's been wrestling for 5 years or less, who could be the next future face of professional wrestling. So we got into this match along with another guy. His name's The Whisper. And we were in a high-flying, balls to the wall, ping pong, fast-paced type of match. And as soon as we were locking up with each other, it was like, okay, like we were hitting literally everything like on all cylinders. And then we had another match last year at something called Southeast First, held by Action. And that was our first ever singles. We meshed so well. Last August, a viral clip came out where he hit a shooting star press off the top rope, but I quickly got up to my feet and then I hit a V trigger as he was coming down. So again, it takes so much trust in that other person to make sure, again, you want to hurt them, but not hurt them. And you guys get the reference from that. So if I literally had to tango with anybody and trust my body with what's going on in the ring, it would be Eli Knight. And And also another guy too named Jaden Newman. He's really good. He just wrestled at Best of the Best at CZW, I believe, but he's been all over the country. He's been to England. He's been to Germany, and I've wrestled him a few times. And he's on my list of people I want to wrestle for the rest of my life.
All right. Well, hopefully he comes down to the New England area and I get to see him at Northeast Wrestling.
Hey, look him up. He's the real deal. They're really good. So his faction is Culture Inc. And then Jaden Newman, he wrestles all around the Southeast, and he sometimes comes up to the Northeast as well. So definitely give those guys a look and shout out to them.
All right. Definitely. I got IWTV, which I'm going to be watching. I did see you post that in your Twitter. But next Friday, June 9th in Waterbury, Pal, is Northeast Wrestling hosting Lucha Mania. And you are going against Israeli action figure Gal Barkay.
Yep.
Now, I've seen this guy, and he hasn't got a victory yet in Northeast Wrestling, but you came close. So both of you are almost in the same status. Of course, I'm going to predict you. I mean, look, I'm wearing your shirt. I'll be cheering you on the way.
There you go.
What's your strategy going into this match?
He's a bigger guy. And again, and this goes back to, again, like style of wrestling. Like I can do every single style of wrestling, which is great. But again, very high emphasis on the high flying. So I feel like where he's got a bigger size than me, I feel like the Lucha Landon's got to come out. So I got to, stay on top of everything. High flying.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna be waiting. I'm gonna see you. Like I said, Joe, I seen this guy the last couple of performances at NEW. I was like, this is the man. And then you know what? I got something for you, Landon. I was taking a picture of you, and you said something to me like, "Oh, man, you trying to step up." But what's up with that? What does that mean? Trying to step up? What does that mean?
What? I didn't realize I said that. Did I say that? I'm sorry if I did.
No, I'm just messing with you, man.
I was about to say. I was like,
dude, you're the most kindest person over there, along with the rest of the NEW superstar. I'm busting your chops, man.
I appreciate it.
I was
about to say. That's funny.
Nah, man. You know what? With you and everybody else in NEW, like I said, I started following NEW ever since I retired from the Army, and Keith Youngblood introduced me to NEW, and ever since then, I haven't not stopped going. Like it's because every month is always something. So whether it's in Bethany, Connecticut, Waterbury, Danbury, I just don't go outside Connecticut. But my other goal is to go down to Worcester, Massachusetts to see Wrestling Open. Thursday night, I got a job too. I work Monday through Friday, so I don't have the benefits like you do. Have a Friday off, but hopefully during the summertime, if you are having a match there, Wrestling Open, I get to see you there as well. And you're in the best of all worlds, especially in the New England area, that you get to wrestle different promotions. So, Landon, I want to say thank you, man, because you've invested a lot of education on us, knowing about your injury, the life itself, about having goals. I mean, I couldn't ask much of what you provided for this show.
Awesome. And I appreciate you guys for having me on. And Ovi, I didn't realize that you served in the Army, but thank you for your service.
Oh, man, I appreciate it, man. Before we go, though, Landon, like all my guests, you have the last words of the show. Please, the floor is yours.
All righty. So there's a lot of different places that you can see me. So again, like Ovi said, I will be wrestling June 9th in Waterbury, Pal, at Waterbury, Connecticut. And I'll be fighting Gal Barkay at Northeast Wrestling. I do have a few other Northeast Wrestling events that's going to be posted soon. You can also catch me at Chaotic Wrestling. You can also catch me in a bunch of different New York, New Jersey promotions. I have to post those whenever that happens. You also catch me at the Scenic City Invitational, which it is coming up July 14th and 15th, and you can watch that on IWTV Live. It's going to be, again, it's one of the biggest tournaments in the country, so definitely keep an eye out for that. If you do want to follow me on social media, you can go on Facebook. And again, like I mentioned before, I do have a Facebook fan page, so you're more than welcome to click the like button on that, and just respecting the privacy for my personal life with my wrestling life. So hit that like button for me on Facebook, on Instagram, Landon Hale 3. On Twitter, that's where I'm at most of the time, at HaleYeah3. I'm punny. And you can catch me, you can catch some clips of me on YouTube if you type in Landon Hale. And I also have merchandise for the Good Doctor. You can go to prowrestlingtees.com/Landon Hale. Get your Good Doctor shirt today, because as your chiropractor, you need to watch your back.